And welcome back. Continuing to work on the left fuel tank. In this video I'm going to be working on the interior outer rib. Also going to be working on basically putting all of the components to the left fuel tank together and dry fitting everything and then setting it aside to start working on the right fuel tank to kind of get it caught up to where I am with this one. Like I said, I'm working on both left and right fuel tanks essentially at the same time, just so I can try to minimize or make most efficient use out of the Pro Seal. So right now I'm working, like I said, on the inner outside rib. Excuse me. There's a couple pieces that you have to attach. The center hole there is where the fuel sending unit will go and will attach to. So right now I'm working on attaching the nut plates for that fuel sending unit to screw into. And then you'll notice there's a couple clecos on the either side of that large hole in the center. And one is a hexagonal bracket basically, and if I recall correctly, it holds a one of the, I think it's a fuel line penetration point, and it holds the hex in place for that hose line connection. And then the other one is just another flange for, I believe, the drain, possibly. I haven't looked close enough to the instructions to recall. So anyway, right now I'm working on the nut plates and squeezing the rivets to hold the nut plates in place. I'm able to get to about a third of the rivets with the squeezer. I don't have the longer throw, and so I've got a limited distance to where I can use a squeezer from the edge of the piece. So now I'm using a bucking bar as basically a back riveter plate and riveting the rest of them in place. Problem I run into is that I'm doing this build by myself. I don't have a whole lot of help, and so sometimes you have to find odd ways of doing something. And so it's just a matter of trying to figure out how to hold the bucking bar and the piece with one hand while riveting with the other. So I actually had a few that I had to drill out and redo, but eventually got all of them riveted in place for the nut plates. So now you see me dry fitting everything to the fuel tank. This is again the interior side of the fuel tank, and you see that bracket there. That's the attached bracket that I worked on a couple videos ago. And you can probably see the top side, the side closest to the camera, has a wider spacer than the bottom side on that, and that was the one I was referring to a couple videos ago, where you want to make sure you put the nut plates on the spacer that's not attached to or not against the flange of that piece there. It's kind of hard to describe, but so that's in place. Like I said, dry fitting everything to basically get everything together and then set this whole thing aside while I work on the right side. So I'm just basically keeping all the parts together by attaching them to the fuel tanks. And it actually looks pretty impressive once it's all put together. So at this point on the left tank, I have the bottom stiffeners installed, and they're Pro Sealed to the skin, but they're clecoed. They're not quite riveted yet. Waiting on an order of Pro Seal to come in and to finally Pro Seal and rivet the stiffeners together. Now it's only been about a day since I put the stiffeners in place, and there's a technique that I'm using that I read on the Vans Form website, where basically you Pro Seal the rib or the stiffener in place and then cleco it and then let it kind of set a little bit, and then you go back and you rivet, and you use the wet rivet technique, where you dab some Pro Seal into the hole, rivet it, and then go back and Pro Seal the back end of the rivets. And so we'll see how that works out. So far, it makes it easier because it's a lot faster to cleco than to try to rivet as you're going along. And so we'll see how it turns out. So now I'm working on the right skin, again trying to get it caught up to where I am with the left, and working on the J stiffener for the top side, and this goes along the entire length of the top side of the fuel tank. And the instructions have you drill one hole in the J stiffener, and then you draw a center line along the whole thing, and then basically you use that one hole to cleco it to the skin, and then you use the holes of the skin to match drill the holes to the J stiffener, and that's what I'm doing here. I made a mistake in that the first hole that I drilled was actually a number 30 hole drill bit. Looking at it, I misjudged, and as soon as I made the hole, I realized it was too big. So it's only the one hole, and there's enough material, so there's enough distance away from the edge of the J stiffener to the hole that I made, that I'm just going to use a number 30 rivet in that one instance. But I dimpled and matched everything for a size 30, a number 4 rivet. I don't think that that'll create an issue, especially it's just the one, and it's not any it's not a structure, integrity issue, so I think it'll be okay. So now I'm putting on the rear baffle, and like I did with the left skin, you put it in place, mark off every 10th hole, and then you countersink. And the reason you mark off every 10th hole and don't countersink those is that you use those to attach the baffle to the skins when you're going to finally close out. That way it makes it more of an accurate hold. If you countersink, the concern is that you may have made the hole slightly larger, so it could be a little offset. That's my assumption anyway. So it just tells you to not countersink that 10th hole and use that to attach it when you're finally going to install a baffle later on. Using the air gun with the countersink tool, and then going down the line. The rest of this is going to be pretty much just preparing this tank and getting it caught up. There was a piece that was attached to the end of this that you saw me cut off a little bit earlier, and that is a piece that you remove during the leading edge chapter, the remaining leading edge of the wing. It has you cut that off and then attach that to the leading edge, so that way when you finish the fuel tanks, it will attach to the leading edge with that piece, and it's kind of a doubler underneath the seam between the wing, leading edge, and the fuel tank. So to this point, like I said, waiting on some Pro Seal to finish the rest of the riveting for the stiffeners I have in place, and then I'll start Pro Sealing the ribs in place. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out how much Pro Seal I need and how much I'm going to use, and going from there. Pro Seal's not cheap, so I'm trying to use it as efficiently as I can, but it's one of those things where you have to gauge, and when you're actually Pro Sealing, you want to make sure you have enough, so we'll figure out how much it takes. So now just getting the J stiffener ready, and then I'll dimple it, and then it'll be ready to be put in place. So I'm going to let this video run out here. Again, for those that continue to watch these videos, I appreciate it. And if you get a chance, hit that like button for me, and we'll see you next time around.